Hey guys, we're here with another episode of the Imperfect Show. I'm Susanna, this is Jeremy, and this week we're just doing something a little bit different. We wanted to talk to you guys about something that is specific to marriage and the area of communication. And we just wanted to share just some things with you guys that have been a help to us, specifically a resource that's been a huge encouragement to us. Jeremy and I have been married for 22 years.
Really?
Almost 22 years.
Is that right?
Yes.
Wow.
Yeah, 22 years this year. So
Seems
almost 22
like only
years.
a couple days.
Almost 22 years. And I think we were married for about 5 years when someone gifted us this book, or I think it was like cassette tapes, the book on cassette tapes or something. I guess I just dated us. I guess I just dated us anyways. But someone
You're
gifted
a lot older
us
than me, so.
this. No, actually no.
Oh.
This resource, and we just wanted to share some of that with you guys today as we kind of talk through some of this.
Yeah, we, being married is extremely challenging. I think anyone would agree with that. I mean, it's not challenging for me. I find it extremely easy, but Susanna finds it challenging. And I've heard other people think it's challenging
not a surprise,
too.
But
Other people think it's challenging too. Marriage is very challenging. There have been a lot of resources over the years that have been a help to us, and some of those are books, and some of those are people. And I think probably even as we get into this conversation, it's important to say that in your marriage, we've said this in other areas, but in your marriage, you can't do it alone, and you shouldn't try to do it alone. Mm-hmm. It doesn't matter who you are. You're going to struggle at some point in your marriage. You may be the two most passive people in the world who just want to get along with everyone all of the time. At some point, you're going to have a point of friction or a conflict or some reason that you're struggling a little bit. And that's okay. It's not what you want, but it's okay. And one of the ways that you can deal with that is by including people in your life that can speak truth to you. And we've had people that have spoken truth to us over the years, which has been very helpful. Sometimes even maybe it's getting counsel and, of going to a counselor and someone who can maybe from a third party perspective, give some perspective on your relationship and what you're going through. We all think we're right all the time. I am right most of the time, but Susanna also thinks she's right sometimes. Yeah. And so we need people to tell us, yes, you're both wrong. Yeah. and you're both right, and there's some middle ground. So that's helpful too. And if you need to do that, then do that. One of the resources I think that's probably helped us the most, us personally, is just different books, different resources that people have given to us. And one of those books is this one. I have it with me. We are actually working through this with some other couples right now. And over the years, as Susanna said, early in our marriage, someone gave us the cassette teachings on this. Yep. It was a box of cassettes that was a teaching on this book. But it's entitled Marriage on the Rock. It's by Jimmy Evans and his wife. And they break down several areas of marriage. It's extremely practical. And what I love about this book in particular, Marriage on the Rock, is that it's principles for marriage. And sometimes they're broken up into 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5, but it's principles, not steps. And there's a real difference to that. Yep. Principles are principles, truths that can apply anywhere. You may have been married for 60 years, you may have been married for 6 months. Principles will apply in your marriage if they're principles. If they're not steps, you need to do 1 and then do 2 and then do 3. That doesn't always work, but if you take these principles, you can make them work. And that's one of the things I love about this book is, the principles in here. They've been a help to us throughout our marriage. Yeah,
there's so many marriage resources out there, so many marriage books that have been written, and I would guess that probably the majority of them are more like how-to books and steps to better communication, steps to better intimacy in your marriage, steps to do this or that, and those are great and helpful probably, but really I think that's why we have just through the years really appreciated this book, because it's not just principles that you can apply to any situation, but they're also principles from the Bible. And we've shared this before, that we are Christians. We try to live our life according to the Bible. And these principles are biblical principles that we can apply to our marriage. And early on in our marriage, we were both on the same page as far as both of us being people who have accepted Christ and really tried to follow his principles and the Bible principles into our lives and into our marriage, and just having that as our foundation. And then it was shortly after that we were given this resource, and I think that's why it was such a help to us, because it wasn't just helpful then early on in our marriage, it's helpful to us now, and it has been through the course of time, because they're timeless principles, because they're founded on scriptures and things that we can read in the Bible. And so I think that's why this has been such a huge help to us, not only because it's just principles, but also principles based on the Word of God, and really that's timeless.
Yeah, and that's what makes this helpful. This book is great. I would encourage anyone to read it, but this, what we're talking about right now, is not about this book. We're just taking the principles out of this book that we'll talk about here in just a minute. But the reason they're effective and helpful is because they're scriptural principles that we can understand. They're just organized in this book in a way that makes it easy to understand, and that's really helpful. So the topic we wanted to discuss today, and the reason we pulled out the book, and you can see it's pretty bent up, and we've spent some time looking at it. The topic or the subject we wanted to discuss is that of communication.
I don't know why it makes me laugh.
This is one that we struggled with a little bit. I would love to know how many people. Thank you for laughing.
Sorry.
I would love to know how many people who are married and love the person they're married to would say they struggle with communication. I think that most issues in marriage, to some extent, come back to communication problems. You decided to get married, and I realize there are some weird situations that people decide to get married in, but for the most part, people decide to get married because they like the person they're marrying, and they've actually spent at least a couple of minutes thinking about the long-term implications of marriage. So they like the person they're married to, but at some point the feelings may dissipate, and now you have to talk to each other, and you have to communicate, and that becomes extremely challenging. And then add to that children and life and everything that goes into that, communication gets really, really hard. We don't all communicate. Personality differences. We don't all communicate the same way. Man, that's a huge lesson to learn, is we communicate differently.
Really, I feel like not just because of personality differences, but also because of life and how life kind of changes you, and as you move through the different phases with you're newlyweds, and so you're trying to really get to know the other person and the way that they communicate. But then life kind of changes that too, with kids, and then moves, and then job transitions, and you get older, and just life kind of changes you anyways as you kind of go through life experiences and, like I said, the phases of life. And so I feel like we change over time as well as people. And so maybe the way that we communicate is different. And so consistently learning the other person in that way too just makes it even more challenging. Just because we change so much over time.
We are a different person at 30 than we were at 20, and at 50 than we were at 30, and things change. And if we're not constantly growing together and learning what's changed in the other person and how to adjust to that, we can find ourselves in a bad place. People will say this after being married for a while: I don't even know them anymore. And it always sounded so ridiculous to me. What does that even mean? You live together, you've done life together. What does that mean? It means you don't know them anymore. They've adjusted, they've changed, you spent a lot of time at work around other people, so their personality, what they like, their priorities have changed. Things change. And if you're not growing through that together and learning how to communicate through that, then you're really going to struggle. Particularly at this moment in time. Now we're at a weird time in our nation's history right now, and maybe 20 years from now, someone will watch this video and they'll say, "What are they talking about?" But if you're watching it right now, then you know exactly what I'm talking about. The whole world, it seems, is quarantined, and if you're not part of what they call essential work or essential businesses, you're not in the healthcare industry or moving things around or providing goods, then you're probably working from home around your family more now than you've been in a while. but still trying to get things done. And so that creates some communication issues as well. And we're all just trying to survive.
Yeah.
But it should be more than survival, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So some principles, and again, these principles are not great because they're in this book. They're great because they're timeless principles for communication. But they're organized really well in this book, and so instead of trying to recreate it or pretend they're ours, I'm just going to tell you they're coming right out of this book. And we're going to walk through some of these things, but these are great. And if you need help with communication, here are some principles that you can use. Here's the first one. We can talk about this: mutual concern or caring. He says this: effective communication to your spouse requires genuine love and concern. And he goes through a list of things: eye contact, affection and body language, countenance, the look on your face. Yeah, voice, level and tone, frequency of contact and ease of emotional connection, attitude towards serving, sensitivity to inner needs, mutual concern. This is caring, sincerely caring for each other is required in communication.
I think this is really hard too, because
To actually care?
well, I mean, not to actually
I know
care,
that's a challenge
but,
for you, actually caring.
but to communicate the caring in all these things. And so
Right.
that's why I think this list is really, really important to think about the way that you are communicating your caring. I think that's what's difficult, because you obviously care about the other person.
Right.
You care about what they're going through. You love that person. You've made that decision. So you obviously do care about them, but it's communicating that care and communicating that concern that you have for them. That's what's difficult, is having that eye contact, showing with the look on your face that you're actually caring about what they're talking about,
Right.
no matter big or small. It doesn't matter if it's about, this is what I found at the grocery store today. Look at this cute dress I just bought. I think it doesn't matter what
What
it
if you
is.
don't actually care? Then what do you do?
Well, then you're not using one of the 5 vital keys to
Oh, I see.
communication in
Okay.
marriage. So then maybe
Make
you need to
yourself
check.
care?
Maybe you need to check your mutual concern.
Okay.
But communicating that through those things, I think that can be really difficult.
And this speaks to, particularly in our culture, the use of cell phones and getting on social media and all those things, and trying to multitask. I can listen to you while I'm also doing this, and we could argue all day about whether or not that's possible. I think it's kind of possible, but a lot of people disagree with me. But what you're not doing, if you're doing that, is expressing or showing mutual concern.
And I think that's the key, is communicating that to them, because that person knows that you care about them, knows that you love them, but how are you communicating that to them? And I think that's what the key here is, communicating that through, those things, not just, of course I care about you and I love you, but how are you communicating that? And by putting your phone down, by really connecting with that person, by looking at them, showing that you care for them. I think that's
Right.
really, really important.
So mutual concern, that's where it starts, is I care about you and I'm going to express that through the way that I look and eye contact and all of those things. That's easy to understand. The second one, and it kind of goes with that, but here's the second one: intellectual devotion. Intellectual devotion. The subtitle to this section is listening. Listening. So it's one thing to express concern. I'm looking at you. I've stopped what I'm doing. I'm communicating with you through body language and those kind of things. But we all know it's possible to do that and be thinking about something else. I'm demonstrating that I care, but I'm not really engaged in what's happening. That's what he's talking about here with intellectual devotion. I do this often, where I'll get halfway through a conversation and then realize I have no idea what's going on, and I have to back up and go, what are we talking about again?
Yeah.
Communication, good communication, requires both things. Looking like you care, but actually intellectually, mentally, and emotionally connecting to what's being said.
Because I think he even says that in here too, is that a lot of times people are communicating things beyond just the words that they're saying. So when you're not really listening to what they're saying, it's not just about the words that they're saying, is what they're trying to communicate to you. And so by actually listening to what they're saying,
Right.
And so I always tell this to our kids too, like, not just look at me, but actually listen to the words that are coming out of my mouth. It's not just hearing what I'm saying, but it's listening to what I'm saying. And you cannot do that if you're not looking at them first, if you're not using, the communicating your care and concern for them. But it's kind of a twofold thing, I think. It's like you are looking at them, you're completely engaged in the conversation, but you're also listening, and that's not just hearing. It's actually listening to what they're saying, and not just the words. It's really what are they trying to communicate to you, not just with their words.
Right.
So you can't really get that if you're not truly listening.
Yeah, and both of those require time. It requires taking the time to engage with one another. We have talked about this before as well. Understanding that two people will communicate differently means that sometimes they're on a different time schedule. You may be really excited about something that you want to say, but your spouse is engaged in something else. They're working on something else, and as much as they love you and want to express that concern and care and intellectually devote time to what you're saying, they're doing something else and they just can't. So when you hit that moment, you have to make a decision. You're either going to stop what you're doing and come back to it, or you can say something like, can I finish up what I'm doing right now, and then I'll have the opportunity to really focus on you. That's a very powerful and oft overlooked tool. Just saying, hey, I'm really interested in this. Can I finish this real quick and come back to it? And I think if we understand the give and take in that, and some people will say, well, you should be willing to stop what you're doing and listen to me. If the house is on fire, or someone's hurt, or something terrible has happened, that's true. If it's the day-to-day stuff and it can wait, then it's okay to wait, and there needs to be respect both ways. I don't think it's one or the other.
Yeah. I think if there's obvious that the person is going through something and they really need you to drop what you're doing and really listen to them, if they're like pouring their heart out to you, I don't think that's a good time to be like, hang on a second.
Yeah, right.
So there are times, of course, for that. But most of the time, if there is that mutual concern for one another, then the other person is willing to wait. If you say like, hey, I really care about what you're saying and I really want to be able to be there for you and hear you, can I just finish what I'm doing really fast, and then I'll be able to fully engage in the conversation. Most of the time that will, because you're communicating your caring by doing that, and your concern for really wanting to be all there for them. So,
and sometimes over the course of a week, let's say, as you have kids and work and all the other things will come up that require an in-depth or a longer conversation. It's okay to say, this weekend, Saturday morning, we'll get coffee. At some point, let's set up a time. Let's have an appointment where we'll go and have this conversation. That's okay too. And I think that is a way to express concern and intellectual devotion. I want to be entirely focused on what you're doing, and I can't right now because of the time or what else, or the things that are going on. And that's a good way to do that. Timing is really important, I think, in all of this.
Yeah, and I think he talks about that a little bit in this chapter too. It's just the time that you choose to bring something up, or the time that you choose to get into these conversations where you're going to be expecting for that other person to listen to you and to, what does he call it, for the listening part? Intellectual devotion. When you need to be intellectually devoted to the other person, then timing is really, really important. And so when you're asking that of that other person, just considering, the timing of it, and kids. And one of the things that I feel like maybe both of us have heard this quite a bit recently is we kind of use our life stages as excuses to where that this can't happen.
Right.
And so I like that you mentioned, maybe setting aside some time and communicating that to the other person. Hey, like, I know we really need to talk about this. If it's not like a day-to-day kind of thing, if it's something that you really need to discuss, and you can you communicate your caring to the other person in this way by setting aside some time that both of you guys can get away, regardless of kids. If this is something that is really, really important to you and we really need to talk about, then you can set aside. I mean, we've just done at-home coffee dates too.
Sure.
The kids are playing in the other room and we can sit here and have a cup of coffee and talk about something. So I think that there's always time to set aside to be able to do this for each other. Yeah,
timing is really important. Just be very careful of that. To me, this is a big one. Don't be upset if you bring up something crazy that requires a lot of time and it's bedtime, or it's first thing in the morning and you're not a first thing in the morning person, or whatever. Be very aware of timing. It's really important.
Yep.
Yes. Okay. Number 3, verbal affirmation or praise. Verbal affirmation or praise. So the first two are kind of the how-to. Here's how you do this. You express concern, you engage emotionally, you engage physically with the way that you look and eye contact and those kind of things. Intellectually, you're engaged. What is required in good communication? Again, some people are really good at communicating, but everything they communicate is loud and aggressive and negative. That's not what we're talking about. We're talking about healthy communication. So what's a key element of that? Praise. Praise is a key element of that. It is possible over the course of our lives, because of the ups and downs, because we're forced into conversations we don't necessarily like, to make everything negative or everything down or everything urgent. And in the process of time, forget to praise our spouse for the good things that they're doing. And it may be the good things with the kids, the good things around the home, the good things going to work and working hard and providing for the family, the good things in taking care of whatever, the good things. We forget to talk about the good things. We forget to praise. And what's really interesting about this is that most of the time when people meet and they learn to like each other, and we'll talk about falling in love, however you'd use that phrase, they decide to get married, there's a healthy amount of praise in the conversations that take place at that stage of a relationship. I love you because, I love that you do this, I love that you do that, I'm praising you for the good things that are happening over here. And yet we get caught up in the day-to-day of married life and we forget to praise each other.
Yeah. I think when we're getting to know each other, a lot of times it's because it's new and we're getting to know that person, we're getting to know like the things that they do, and it kind of, I think, draws more our attention more to it because we're getting to know them and it's all new and it's exciting, and we think this person is really neat and we love what they do and how they do it and all this, and then after you get to know them for a while, you're like, of course, yes, like I love that about them, and I've already said that to them, and it can just become like a,
Yeah, they're supposed to do that. Or they do it all the time.
This is kind of how they
That's
are.
who they are.
This is what they do, and so we kind of get used to it, and we forget that it's important for them to hear that or to be reminded of that. And we've probably all heard this before where, I told you I loved you the day I married you. If something changes, I'll let you know. And that's not really how we should live.
Right.
And only because, of course, that person probably knows that that's not going to change or that hasn't changed. And we say, I love you, to each other, but just to be reminded of the small things that you appreciate about them. And, even if it's the same thing that they've always done or the same way that they've always been, it's really, I think most people like to be reminded of that and to be encouraged by that.
Yeah, and the world is a very negative place as well. I think that most of us have a high tolerance for negativity and difficulty and struggle outside of our home. As long as inside of our home, we know there's someone there who appreciates, or at least pretends to appreciate, expresses appreciation for the things that we do. And sometimes this doesn't come natural. Some are more wired this way, to show praise and to say how much they appreciate folks. And by the way, if you're married to someone that's that way, know that that's also probably their kind of love language. That's what they would expect in return.
Yeah.
But we're not all wired that way. And so this may be something you have to work on deliberately. Maybe you need to sit down and write some things down. This is what I'm going to praise my spouse for today, or these are some observations that I've made. That doesn't seem romantic, but trust me, it's really helpful to be very deliberate about praise and very deliberate about just saying thank you and saying you're doing a good job. And I noticed that, I recognized that. Praise, and again, we could say a lot of things here. We need to move on, but if you're not praising your spouse, eventually someone else will. And that can lead you down a difficult road. So be very diligent about praise, encouraging and helping each other that way. The next principle here for communication is one that we could spend an entire video on: loving confrontation. The Bible would say it this way: speaking the truth in love. Speaking the truth in love. Loving confrontation. A relationship where there is no confrontation is not as authentic as it needs to be. It's certainly not as connected as it needs to be. Again, as you go through your life, there will be times where things won't go well, where your feelings will be hurt, where the other person's doing something that's destructive or hurtful or harmful to themselves or someone else in the home. That requires confrontation. And to avoid that confrontation is not healthy or helpful for a relationship. On the other hand, some people will say, I'm just this way, and I say it as it is, and I call them as I see them. Love needs to be an important element of that. And love means that I care about you, that I'm confronting you, I'm bringing this up, I'm talking about this, not because you hurt my feelings, but because someone needs to bring this up. And I care about you, I care about us, I care about our kids, I care about our family, and so I'm bringing this up. It's loving confrontation. It's speaking the truth, but in love, and being very careful and very thoughtful of the person that you're speaking to.
Mm-hmm. And it is loving to the other person to bring that up in a like in a loving way, not in a badgering way, not in a cruel way. But if your spouse, in a healthy marriage relationship, if a spouse hurts your feelings, or if a spouse does something that is hurtful to you, or that maybe you don't agree with, or whatever, it is loving to them to bring that up in a lovingly confrontational way.
Right.
And that is showing your love to them, not letting it go, not thinking it's not that big of a deal, I'll deal with it later. That's not okay, and that's not showing love to them, because you're basically holding that over their head, and it's just not okay. And it took us a really long time to figure this out, because I'm the kind of person that does not, I just kind of like let it go. Like, oh, it's not that big of a deal. Well, then after a while, it becomes a really big deal.
Yeah.
And we had a really big, I think after 12 years of marriage, just had a huge kind of blow up, because I had just kind of let things go for a really long time and kind of build up to this point. And that's not loving. Confronting someone in that way after you've kind of let things go for a long period of time and not bringing it up to them in a loving way is not showing your love to them. And it's not fair to that other person to kind of hold that over them, and it can be really damaging to a relationship.
Yeah. And you may be in a relationship where you just bury things, don't talk about things, don't deal with things, and you'd say it's working for us. Maybe it's working for you, I don't know. Every day you're getting through from one end to the other, and you guys are kind of living your own lives. But understand that that's not the relationship you were created to have. Mm-hmm. And that's not the type of communication that continues to grow and develop and mature a relationship. So you can choose to do that, clearly. Mm-hmm. But the loving thing, the healthy thing, is to confront issues as they come up, and then do it in a loving way, work through those, be kind. Remember timing, intellectual devotion, expressing your concern and your care, offering praise for the good things that are done. And if you're offering praise along the way, that makes this part easier. But doing that, we could use a lot of analogies, but if you look at a plant that is growing but has a lot of dead growth on it, the loving thing to do for that plant, the healthy thing to do for that plant, is to tear off the broken limbs, tear off the things that are hurting its growth, and that helps it to grow. Mm. To leave it on there is not helpful. And you might say, well, I don't want to hurt the plant, or you wouldn't do that. And in a relationship, sometimes you need to deal with the broken stuff and the dead stuff, and do it in a way that is encouraging and helpful. And it really, really can be.
Because most of us can, or I shouldn't say most of us, a lot of people can deal with, well, I'm just getting by, I'm just making it work. Right. This is kind of how it has to be, which is okay, but it's not the best way. And like you said, it's not that healthy relationship that you were designed to have. And so I think that's the key, is what kind of a relationship do you want to have? And you can make it work maybe for some time that way, but it's maybe not going to be everything that it's supposed to be or that it could be.
Yeah. And it's putting all of these pieces together. It's being focused. It's being intellectually devoted. It's expressing praise. It's caring. It's all of those things that create an environment where dealing with things that aren't helpful and that may even be hurtful is possible. And that leads to the last thing. We're running out of time. That leads us to the last thing, which is intimate discussion. And I think that's the goal. That's what all of us would desire to have, is openness in our relationship, where we can talk about anything and it's okay, because we built a foundation of communication that allows that to happen. And that's really, I think, the goal.
And I think that's what all of us really want in life, is we want someone who's always on our side, someone who you can say whatever to, and they're going to think the best of you. And but that's not really possible without all these other things. And I feel like intimate discussion is kind of the final, that's kind of like the goal. That's where we all want to be. And we all want someone that knows us in that intimate way, that knows us for who we really are and still loves us. And I think that's the goal for all of us, is to get to that point.
And it requires putting all these principles together and working toward that, and getting to the place where you can share that. And again, you don't have to do this. A lot of people don't. I would say probably most people don't. They just go about their lives and do their thing. But if you really want to have the type of relationship that you can have, then begin putting these pieces of effective communication together, and you certainly will. There are a lot of great resources out there. Find one. This is one that's helped us. But certainly this list of principles has been very, very helpful to us as well. And I hope to you, and I hope that you're doing okay with this craziness that we're all living through right now. We don't know how it's all going to end exactly. We will get to the other side though. But in the process, don't punt your relationships. Don't damage the communication in your house. Do your best to continue to build and grow and develop, and you'll be happy that you did.
I think this is a time that we can really take advantage of to have. We are not always forced to have this kind of a time, or we don't force ourselves to have this kind of time, and now we are kind of having to. So I think taking advantage of this and working on some of these things, we can come out on the other side healthier and stronger.
And better for it. All right, well, that's it for today. Go ahead, if you have not yet, subscribe to the channel. Hit the notification bell. Now that does one thing for you. It lets you know when new content comes online. And we post a lot of content, all kinds of stuff, not just this, but things that I think would be a help to you. So go ahead and hit the notification bell. That lets you know when new content comes online, and share it out if you would like to. Go ahead and comment. We love to get comments. That even kind of guides what we want to talk about as we go forward, and we plan on doing this every week. So give us some things that we can talk about, and things that are important to you, and we'd love to discuss those things. In a real sense, we're all figuring these things out as we go. Now, thankfully, we have some direction and we can learn from others, but this is a good platform to be able to come together and say, hey, let's talk about this, let's discuss this, let's look at this. And we don't have to be perfect. Certainly none of us are, but we can move forward together. So thank you.
Thanks, guys.
I look forward to talking to you next time.